Welcome to another video from Lockdown Electronics with me, Bill, and this time we've got something a little bit different, and that's we're going to have a look at this device here, which is the Quansheng UV5 brackets 8, UV5 brackets 99, UV6 even, but it's the Quansheng radio, and there are countless videos on YouTube about this, so I claim no originality here at all. But this radio is ridiculously cheap. I got this for about £21 off eBay from a UK seller. You can get them for less than that as well. It's a VHF UHF handheld, as you can see, and it's also a receiver, so it'll receive certainly the stock radio's got a reasonable reception range, and it'll also receive AM airband. But what's particularly fascinating about this radio is there's a massive community of people who have now written open source replacement firmware, and quite frankly, whichever version of firmware you put on it, you're probably slightly mad if you don't, because it just makes such a difference to the radio. Now, let's say for instance you wanted to listen to some AM transmissions that weren't in the airband, you know, let's say, I don't know, military airband or something, then installing the new firmware actually allows you access to that, and the quality's remarkable really, for a radio that's cost about £20. Now, I know people are probably going to say, yeah, but the spurious emissions aren't great on 270. Well, maybe they aren't. I've got very little intention of transmitting on this. Despite having a license to do it, I've actually bought it as a receiver, and I happen to think it's rather good at it. So yeah, there's at least 3 or 4 versions of the firmware, and depending which version you've got, people will argue vehemently that their version is slightly better. I've tried a couple. I used the one that's called Egzumer. That met my need. I realise people are going to probably say, yeah, but they've stopped supporting it. Yeah, fine. Like I said, it met my need. It allowed me to listen to what I wanted to listen to, which is good. But there is another modification you can do, which is hardware, and that's quite remarkable, and that involves replacing the FM chip that's in here, I think it's a BG1080, with a more sophisticated chip, and you install a third-party circuit board for that, and I paid I think £13 for the third-party circuit board, so we're now up to a total price of 34 quid, and I've now got a radio that receives from medium wave up to about 1.2 gigahertz, and actually, considering what this is, the quality is quite remarkable. So I'm making no claims that it's a fantastic general coverage receiver, but what the modifications do is produce something that's quite incredible. And what I really wanted to show in this video was my attempt at doing the hardware conversion, because I can understand some people might be put off by the soldering that's involved. So I'm just going to give you my honest impressions of it. But let's start first of all by looking at the radio and what it actually does. The radio then is a fairly conventional looking handheld transceiver, as you can see in the close-up there, and at the heart of it from a receiving point of view is the BK1080, which is an FM radio chip, and that's what does the work of reception really. Now all the additional firmware mods, and these are my words, it essentially seems to make better use of that chip's capabilities, because there's no doubt the 2 versions of the firmware that I've tried definitely improved the quality of the AM reception, even though it's an FM chip. So the firmware mods that I'm aware of, and there's undoubtedly more, you can spend a few hours on GitHub trying to get your head around it if you want, are Egzumer, F4HWN, IJV, and then there's the CEC firmware, which he also does a version which does the hardware mod to include the HF later on. And all those versions of the software seem pretty good, and certainly for what I wanted, I was quite happy with Egzumer. The people who like one particular model one particular type seem to be very keen on pointing out to you how foolish you are if you don't have that particular type installed. I don't know, I can't comment, but certainly it was much improved from the stock firmware by putting one of these new versions on. It really is very straightforward to flash the radio. Now the hardware mod essentially involves adding a circuit board to the radio, and I wanted that picture so that you could see what we were talking about here. It's quite a small circuit board, and it does fit roughly in the position you can see there, although obviously it's inside the radio, but it fits underneath the speaker on the main board. Now it's quite a small board. There it is with a scale for comparison, but on the board there, that 16-pin chip, which is the SI4732, that's a much more capable receiving chip. And what it essentially does, it replaces the BK1080. Now at the bottom left of the additional circuit board, where there appears to be a space for an 8-pin device, that's where you solder it onto where the BK1080 was on the circuit board. This will make sense later. And then along with 3 other connections, that board essentially takes over the reception duties in the radio. Now I said it's much more capable. There's an internal circuit diagram from the data sheet, Silicon Labs, and essentially this provides reception from the medium wave right up to well, almost the beginning of the microwaves. So it clearly is much more capable, but it needs something more than just the normal firmware to make it work. And I think it's also probably worth pointing out at this point that all the firmware mods usually end up meaning that you have to compromise something. That is because there's only about 60k of storage space for the firmware on the radio, and so things get chopped out. Now over here in Europe, we don't need the NOAA frequencies, so we can lose all that, and there's a bit of space there. But to allow the allow the HF mod to work properly, CEC firmware removes the FM radio capability. There is a version where you can get both, but I didn't miss the FM broadcast FM receive capability. I wasn't too worried about that. But just be aware there is always compromises, because they're forever trying to fit things into the space. So there we go, that gives you the general idea. Let's now go to the bench and have a look at the radio itself. Okay, this is not the easiest thing to film, but I am going to try and get you some reasonable close-ups. So this is the radio, and the first thing to say is, rarely is it seemed to me so easy to take something apart. So we simply remove the battery, which just unclips. Need to pull off the volume knob, but that literally does just pull off like that, not even difficult. And a careful inspection there, you can see that neither the volume pot or the RF socket for the antenna are actually secured to the case, which means the entire radio can be simply unclipped. And to do that, we just need to ease up this bottom end. So I'm just going to use a flat bladed screwdriver. Hopefully you can see just how easy this is. It's already moved up a bit, you possibly saw that. I need to ease it up just a little bit more, and it really is only just a little bit more. So I'm trying to do this while not getting in the way of the picture, which is probably more difficult than just out. There we go. Right, okay, so you can see I've now lifted that end. So when you lift that end, you need to be careful. Get it up to say about that point, and then you need to take the chassis in that direction. So you're going to ease the chassis out, possibly didn't see that move terribly well. And then the radio is now separate from the case, but you do need to be aware, if I turn it over carefully, that the speaker is still attached. It's actually soldered just there, 2 wires. I've just disturbed the keypad matrix, but that just pushes back in. So once you've got the case open, first thing to do is just unsolder those 2 connections. And the circuit board, I'm just going to show you while I've got a reasonably good camera angle. Here's the circuit board. You can probably see that it's extremely thin. The circuit board is actually going to go here. Just try and position it. It's going to go about there. And we're going to be removing some components, and one of the components we're going to be removing is that FM chip, because this is the chip that replaces it here. And then we're going to be soldering that board in position there, and it has to be thin because obviously it's got the speaker just behind it. So hopefully you've seen a reasonable amount there. I'm going to just now unsolder the speaker and then get set up to do some more of the soldering. Okay, I'm set up now with soldering guides, etc., flux paste and various other bits and pieces here ready to go, and I'm going to do my best to not get my hands in the photo, but it's not the easiest thing doing this job, and it certainly isn't the easiest thing doing this job and filming it. But essentially I need to remove this chip here and those 2 components there, 2 tiny little SMD components there, one smaller than the other, and then I can get on with fitting the board. Now you've obviously got to be extremely careful here, and I'm using this well-known analog microscope, also called a magnifying glass with a light around it. I've got a digital microscope, but quite frankly, as somebody who wears reading glasses of the varifocal type, I actually get on better using a magnifying glass like this. So I'm going to attempt to remove these and then clean the board up, and then we'll get on with fitting it. So hopefully you're going to get an idea of what it looks like. So I'll just quickly show you a still here. That's the part of the board I'm going to be working on, and these are the 3 components that I'm planning on removing. So I'm just going to put a little bit of flux on there, if it'll go, just to try and make my work easier. I don't know whether that's going to help or not, but it might. And I'm not sure if this tip will be big enough, so it certainly melts the solder. I don't think it's going to be. Now I think what I'm going to do is use I've got another soldering iron here which has got a blade shaped tip, so I'm going to I'll just get that clean, and I'm going to try and use that instead. So I'm going to grasp the edge of the chip, and I'm going to try. Oops, no, that didn't work very well, did it? I think I'm going to try and feed a fine screwdriver underneath to try and lever it up. I wanted to film this, while I was actually doing it, because I wanted you to see how easy or hard it is depending on your view. So right, that's me. Okay, I've now managed to lift one side of the chip, which is good. You can see, hopefully see, it's now prised up. That should make removing the other half of it much easier. So what I'm now going to do is grasp it with the pliers. If I'm in the picture there, I'm sorry. And I'm going to just dab along the other 4 pins, and that should, yep, there we go, there's the chip removed. That's good. I'll clean up those pins in a minute, and the next thing is to remove the 2 really small components. So I am going to try and use the small iron to do that. I'm going to try and remove the smallest one first if I can. Just going to try and heat one end of it and just prise it up. Don't think this tip's going to be up to the job. It is moving it. Yeah, there we go. That's it. Right, let's try and remove the one next to it, which is this one here. I'm going to try and go from this side for that. So I'm just going to try and heat both ends and just push it sideways. It's overkill because of the size, but it's going to heat it very quickly and just get it done. Yeah, there we go. Came off no trouble at all. So that's the three components removed that need to be removed. So I'll come back when I've cleaned up the flux residue, and I'm also going to dab the pads with some solder wick, just so I've got a nice flat surface to work on. Okay, board's cleaned up, pads are clean, and here I've got the new board, and I've put a few little really tiny dabs of glue on it, which I'm just letting go off a bit, and that's because I just want it to stay still once it's installed. And if you get those 6 traces aligned with the 6 tabs that I've unsoldered, you've pretty much got it in the right place. The rest of it, it's fairly straightforward to fit. I wanted to use glue that would still allow me to move it a little bit if I needed to. When that's fixed, I'll come back and you can watch my attempts at soldering some small tabs. That'll be fun. Okay, tabs are cleaned with some isopropyl alcohol, and now they're obscured by some solder paste, some flux to hopefully ease the process. So I'm just going to try and get away with a really small iron here, just to tin the pads on the new circuit board, if I can manage to do that. Well, ironically, the bottom side, it seems really clear that they're connected, but the top side, I'm not sure. So I'm going to just get the meter and check, and then I'll come back. Okay, well, I didn't film it, but that one, the top one, and those two both checked out fine. It was this one that was open circuit, so I've refluxed it, and I've now run a fresh bit of solder across, and all 8 connections now check out on continuity. So that's the really fiddly bit of the circuit board soldering done. I'm now going to solder in this connection up here, and then we'll get on with putting the little jumper wires in, which certainly are fiddly, but I think they're fiddly in a bit of a different way. And yeah, that's taken, but just for completeness sake, yep, all good. Right, I'm going to clean that up with a bit of IPA, and I'll come back when I'm putting the jumper wires on. Okay, this is the bit I've been looking forward to the least. I've got a tiny bit of wire here, and it's a single strand from a little bit of multi-core hookup wire. Okay, I've used a different brand of hookup wire, and it is instantly easier. So I've managed to get that end soldered to the pad. I've now got to solder it to the top of that resistor there, which I'm going to try and do next, which should be fun. And that's certainly way too small to be able to show you on the camera. So I'm sorry, you'll have to just take my word that I'm doing that. This was definitely the fiddliest bit. Just going to have a little bit of solder on the iron, and hopefully that'll be enough to, yeah, that looks alright. Okay, I didn't record it, but I've now put a jumper from this second pin here around that little tiny capacitor there onto the left hand side of this larger capacitor here, and although some videos show that just going in a straight line, I've actually taken it in a slight loop around there, so I'm 100% sure that it is not in contact with the one underneath. It would have been the other one's quite high up, so it would have been probably been able to see it, but there's no doubt at all that that's not that. Right, I think that's all the jumpers. I'm just going to double check the instructions, and then I suppose we have to see if the radio switch is on. Eek. Okay, I've just soldered the speaker back on, and I've attached the battery to the back. You can do that with it out the case. So I'm just going to switch on, and it's booted up, and it is still showing the same programs. Whether it works properly or not is another matter. I've obviously got the Egzumer software, firmware installed on here, which won't make full use of this board. So next thing to do is to flash the CEC HF firmware onto it. So I'll get the radio back together now. It appears to at least be working, and then we'll see how that works out.
CTD, this is G0, Alpha Uniform Golf saying, very good morning.
Yeah, fine, Arthur from G3PQD. Yeah, thanks for the clarification, and thanks for the description. Yes, it looks lovely there in the front, and it's I can understand the view there. I can see the sort of visor in front there on the picture, and of course the little aerial in front of that.
Well, hopefully that little snippet of 40 metre lower sideband conversation demonstrated it certainly is working rather well. In fact, I'm quite surprised just how well it is working. So what I've just done here is grab the screen just to quickly describe what you can see. So by pressing the FM key on the radio, normally that would take you into the FM receiver mode. Now that takes you into the HF mode, and again, this isn't intended to be a set of instructions, but you can see we're on 7.176 megahertz lower sideband. You can have CW, lower sideband, upper sideband, and AM. And to the right of the frequency above where it says megahertz, the -180 is the frequency of the BFO. So it's possible to tune the VFO in 1 kilohertz steps, and then by going to the BFO mode you can then fine tune, so you can actually tune a great deal finer than just 1 kilohertz. S meter below it, and then below that is the various menus depending. You can see I'm currently in BFO, that's highlighted, but you've got band change, step, the low noise amplifier, the bandwidth which you can adjust, and the BFO, and then underneath the very bottom line essentially is telling you what it is that you're altering. So yep, that's pretty impressive really, and I'm pleased to say that the very fact I've shown you that means that it's working. So that was a very worthwhile mod. All I had to do after I got the radio back together was just flash the CEC HF firmware onto the radio. It didn't disturb any of the memories, so the VHF and UHF frequencies I've got in are all completely undisturbed and still work absolutely fine. Okay, well that's the Quansheng UV5R, and I think you'll agree, considering what we've got here, it's pretty remarkable. It's going to be particularly useful for me when I'm off travelling around on holiday and things, to be able to take a nice small portable receiver, and one that quite frankly was not too expensive. So if you ever go at the mods, well, you know, good luck. If it all goes wrong for you, don't blame me. It's at obviously at your own risk. But I think the really important point to note here is I've flashed countless versions of firmware onto here without the slightest problem, which, you know, that's been absolutely fine. And I've done the HF modification, and that's absolutely fine as well. And you know, it didn't even cost me 40 quid. You can't go out for dinner for 40 quid anymore, so you know, just bear that in mind before you decide to criticise it. I think it's quite remarkable. I hope you've enjoyed watching, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video.